get started with a little bit of background about this particular class I'm talking about, not the whole program. Jacksonville University, as most people probably guess, is in Jacksonville, Florida, and we're a small private school, and we are starting this fall with our business analytics major for our undergrads. We're working on a graduate level one as well right now that will probably be implemented in 2016. But this is like our foundation that I'm talking about. It's a class, and in this class in particular, I talk about how we're going to link experiential learning with a couple of things, the analytics as well as the undergraduate research.
You better repeat it down there.
Okay. And so with this, I started thinking about this course. It's a fairly new course. It was developed about 3 or 4 years ago, and it really came up because the faculty kept saying, we need our students to have more Excel. So really they were saying they wanted an advanced Excel class. And I said, well, you know, we can do that. Okay, that's been done quite a bit in a lot of places. But then we started looking at that. We had a course on the books already that wasn't being taught, and that course was called Applied Business and Economic Analysis. So we said, well, we'll go ahead and put this through, and we're going to teach it some advanced Excel and a little analysis in that. And it was given to me. I was new faculty there, hadn't been there a couple years, and given to me to kind of develop. Along that time, many of you will probably remember that SACS started coming through. Everybody remembers SACS and experiential learning? And I know everybody in here has probably heard a lot about experiential learning. That's kind of been a new buzz in the last few years. So they said, we need more experiential learning. So you're doing Excel in there. Can you do that too? Because you're doing projects, and you know this is a good fit for that. And I said, well, let me think about that and see how we can do that as well. And also include the analysis. So we started looking at, well, we wanted to do a business analytics. This was the first kind of core course that was going to count for that. How do we get people interested in doing the business analytics? You know, how do all our students have a foundation in that? So I started thinking about that. So I call it, and many of you have heard in research, my approaches got three kind of the pieces to it. So triangulation became the idea of, can you do that all in one course? There's a lot to do, and typically have been done in different courses. All right, so I looked at the experiential learning piece of it and said, how can I incorporate more of this into this particular course? And so it was a natural fit in reflection. You know, they needed to be able to see what they're doing, reflect on it, think about things like that. Take initiative, make decisions. Okay, so here I wanted to get away from a basic Excel course or advanced Excel course even, because I found, and many of you found the same thing, that when you teach Excel, you teach them how to punch buttons and they go away, and then employers say, I sent them to a course, or they took it in college and they don't know what to do with it. Okay, there's a disconnect. Not that we haven't done a good job teaching them where everything is in there and explaining a little bit, but there was kind of a disconnect between how to apply it, you know, so that they could actually make decisions and be accountable for it. So that kind of was a piece of it that I was really looking to try to figure out how to do better, all right, so that they could take it out and apply it more than just learning, because we all know the versions change, things change. It was more important to understand that part of it. All right, so I wanted to design that experience around that. So I came up with a dashboard. Now, we all know what dashboards are out there. So what I found, I have found a book called Dashboards and Reports. And I thought, now, how can I design a project around something like this, teach them some Excel skills, but not make it just about Excel and where buttons are, but about understanding what they're actually doing and why they would do it. So this became kind of a project that was like the central project of this course. And it's actually really been a neat thing that I've found from it, is the fact that I send it to them very open, and it's very different than the normal projects that they're used to in academia. I say, here's a business, and they want you to develop a dashboard for management that would let them easily see how the company's doing. So you're going to build a dashboard. And they go, oh, well, they think they already know all Excel, but they have to translate that skill into something now that can be used. And so this is an example of one student here. So creating these charts, and I know you can't see really well, but at the bottom, it's in an Excel spreadsheet, and this is kind of what you would show management on how they're doing by the charts, but they have to do all this work managing, and I give them a data set. I don't give them just 50 or 100 records like they're used to. I give them 50 or 60,000 records. And the reason I do that is to get them used to working with larger amounts of data, to become kind of comfortable with that, to give them that first step kind of into figuring out that you can't always kind of sort and filter to find an answer. That when you get a large data set like that, you're going to have to do something a little different. So it gets them working with pivot tables and a little bit of power pivot and bringing in some new things for them to be able to look at, and then visualize it in a way. Now we're talking about this is across a business core. And so marketing, we have aviation in our business college, all these different areas, and being able to visualize it so any of these different areas could see and find it useful that way. So this was one example of the actual dashboard. And I make them model it out so that they have to start with a question. They look at the data, they look at the columns, and they start with a question that they want to ask the data that management cares about, like, what are the top salespeople, who has, how many, what are the gross profit, what are the lowest producers, anything. There's thousands of questions they can ask, so they're all different, and they all have to look at it. And I don't tell them any, other than it has to be important, what to do. So they have to think for themselves that way and figure out how to bring it out so that it could be helpful that way. So again, one example. Here's another one that's done. I started throwing in some things. I learned, this is pretty neat. And I got into it. So I said, hey, how about some histograms? Oh my goodness, now they have to understand what a histogram is? Okay, so they had to end up with a chart. And I started saying, okay, this chart measures a goal. That's very different than measuring something, something where you're just looking at how much sales are or something. So they had to learn how to calculate, say, the gross profit and then figure out who made the goal or not. So for a lot of them, it was taking in a lot of these different and kind of putting it all together to let them be able to use it. So this is another example of a dashboard. So it's kind of neat in the sense that they all had something different too. They couldn't go together and one person understand it and another person not understand it, but they could help each other, but everybody had a different product. In the end, everything looked different. Now, then we came along and they said, I asked you to do experiential learning. And that's fine and dandy, but you know what? We really were thinking it was undergraduate research, and you're not doing exactly that. So could you throw in some of that too? And I'm thinking, oh my, now we're really getting a loaded course here. There's a lot of stuff going on in this course, right? So how can I make this work? How can we do undergraduate research, teach Excel skills, teach them critical thinking, how to make decisions, how to manage large sets of data? I mean, this is a lot of stuff. So I started thinking about it. So I went and did some more research. And I found this from the University of Texas at Austin. They had these statistics in their natural science department. And they said, if you do undergraduate research early, and this is a sophomore level class I'm talking about here, and if you do it early, they're more likely to go to graduate school, they're more likely to have better grades. I mean, there were just a lot of good reasons. And typically, we had always seen it done later, like in capstone courses, that kind of stuff. So I thought, well, maybe there's a way for me to do that in here. But I could make them write a paper, but I didn't really want to make them write another paper because that's typically what you see in there. So what could I do a little different that could kind of tie all these different things together? So I came up with research posters. And so since the whole dashboard theme is around dashboards, which is visual, anyway, I said, let's do some undergraduate research about this dashboard you built. So we did usability issues, testing issues, and they have to go out and interview just one person. They take their dashboard. I require that it be not another student. It can be your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your uncle. I mean, it can be anybody as long as they work, they've used Excel, okay, and they're not another student at JU. And they say, okay, well, what this does is it makes them sit down. They have to design their questions. They have to sit down with that person and go through their charts and what they've done and see if somebody else can understand them. It gives them a chance to show what they've learned. And it's really been a good experience for them seeing somebody else besides, you know, their instructor, their professor saying, oh, you really need to understand this. Because they come back and go, you know, my uncle said, this is really good stuff, that I really need to know this. And they're like, I told you that the first day of class, right? But they didn't believe me. Now it reinforces the fact that somebody out there that's not in academia is saying, these are useful skills. Then the other part of it is, they see all the mistakes they made. Again, not just from my grade that, you know, out there, but also from other people. Like they learn little things, like they don't label things. They think the labels are not important, right? And they find out that those labels are really important. Can you understand a chart if it's not labeled well? It's really difficult unless somebody's going to sit with you and explain every piece of it, right? So they get, from another perspective, they get that feedback that they need to say, wow, now if I had to do this again, I would do this really different. They also learn about whether the questions were appropriate or, you know, could have been a little better. And so it gives them a chance to put all that together. They compare it to what they thought they were saying, which is the communication end of the chart, to what somebody else says they see. And in that poster, they have to set it up. They introduce it, just like a regular researcher. They introduce what they've done, which is the dashboard. They built a prototype. I call it a prototype because none of them are done and none of them are perfect. And that's okay. We only have so much time. If they could take this feedback and move on, they would correct anything that the feedback based on me and whoever they interviewed, and they would make it better. But we don't have that much time in the course, so I call it a prototype. They introduce that, then they do the methods. They talk about how they had to interview somebody and get an in-depth interview, and what that, you know, how they set that up, what they did to control that, did they have the questions they were going to ask already ready. Then they come into the results. They show the dashboard they actually created. They talk about what the actual interview said about it. Then they come over to their conclusion, and they tell me then, what did you learn? You know, what's your conclusion about your dashboard? Was it effective? Did it work right? There's two pieces to everything. One is the technical side. Did the chart, like if you had an interactive control, like a checkbox on there, and the chart was, you know, the lines disappearing for one of the year's sales, did it work? That's one piece. But the other piece is, did they understand? Okay, so you need to see both of those sides and talk about that in your conclusion. So again, it's not a real long, like, you know, 10-page paper they have to write. Stays with the visual on it and lets them do some communication. Then the last piece of that, this is another example of one. So again, they're all different, which is kind of neat. And that lets me go to the visualization part of it as well. So not only are they visualizing it in a poster, okay, manipulating these large data sets that way, they need some soft skills we've all talked about, right? So we have our 2 times a year in the fall, I do a dashboard competition, which means they have to compete with their posters. And they have to, you know, I go out there and we have judges that go around and rate them. And so, and I don't have a big prize, but they get extra credit, which they like. So they can win that way. But it lets them communicate. As you can see, it builds a little, we go into in the center of the business college right there. We put up stands. They actually put the posters up, as well as the PowerPoint they have. Then they put it on a poster board, and they put it up there. And then we have people come, the judges and other students come around, look at everything that way. This is then actually 2 of the winners with one of their posters behind them. And so it's kind of the grand finale. In the springtime, we do a research symposium for faculty and students, and they have to present. That's part of the class. They present their posters at the research symposium that way as well. So these 2 guys are winners of one, and they did. And then, interesting enough, and I have more than just this, but just to kind of tie it up with this particular presentation, I've done surveys of the students each semester to see kind of how things are working. And these are 2 of the things that I asked them about. And you can see it was interesting to me to see what the students thought. And so the top one, I gave them a list of things that in this class that they should kind of be learning and doing. And they rated the #1 thing that they got out of this class was critical thinking, which I thought was really interesting. And it's true. So they equated what they did with having to think, because I didn't structure it, step by step for them. I said, here's, I need you to make me a dashboard. Your objective is to do something that's important that management cares about. They want to know how the people are doing. They don't know. They didn't look at the data. They want you to look at the data. You tell us. So they required that critical thinking to go on. And that's what they rated that the highest in there. Then their Excel, they did learn those advanced Excel skills. Professionalism. They saw that in how they designed things, how they acted, presenting. I make them dress in, business attire when they come and present, that kind of thing. Teamwork. They do the dashboards individually because I want to make sure they're learning the skills, but they do the posters in teams. And so they have to bring their research together on that. And then the problem solving, they have to, fix things when they don't work, that kind of stuff. A lot of that goes on. They get very frustrated sometimes with that part. Communication, and that kind of surprised me, the oral communication, because I thought with having these presentations and these posters out there, that would be like the highlight. But if you notice, it really kind of ranked according to the time they spent. They spent the majority of their time working on those dashboards and having to learn a lot of skills they didn't know, and I think that's why that really ranked really high on their perception of what was going on, versus even though we had these opportunities for them to present their work, it got a little lower. Still a pretty high percentage, but less of them realized that. I would have thought 100% would have said, I get oral communication. They had to stand up there and talk to people, but some of them didn't even register that part of it. And then networking, because they got out there, they had a chance for other students, they had judges, that kind of stuff to go on as well. The other thing that was interesting, the other chart that I put up here, is about, if you look at that, remember I said if you get them early, that you have more chance that they'll find it valuable. If you notice, when you look at it by college level, the sophomores actually thought that it increased their interest more than if you were a senior, which I thought was really interesting. And I think, again, it has a lot to do with the fact that I think a lot of it is seniors if they put it off, they're probably already maybe putting it off because it wasn't going to be their favorite thing. But I think they're maybe more also, they haven't had as many courses yet, so I think they're also maybe a little more open to thinking about going in this direction a little more than maybe they would have without a class. So that kind of sums up a little bit about trying to do kind of a lot of things at once, in a little different way. But I will add one other thing is, they do complain a lot while it's going on, because it's a lot of work. So they do a lot of complaining and really not liking me so much. But then usually when it's over and they've gotten their grade and that part, this kind of the stress is over, they usually come back and say, I didn't think I could do it. I did, and I learned a lot. So it's been kind of rewarding. All right, is there any questions? It doesn't, go ahead. Okay. Yes, it's required in our core. Well, being a small private school, our classes are fairly small anyway. We do really encourage them. It's fairly new course, so some of them have gotten away with it later because of that. But yeah, we really do try to get them earlier. And they have another course after that that we do have a prerequisite for, so that's kind of helping now. But it's only been in our core for like 3 years, so it's really working its way in more to that. But yeah, the earlier the better. I think they adjust better and are more ready, and it also helps other classes because other classes can use the skills they learn that way too. Everybody has to use the same data set, and I do that just so I can monitor what's going on and they don't cheat, basically. And you say, well, they could cheat then because they can share, but they're all different. See, that's it. There's so many questions. Like, they'll have 60,000 rows of data, and there'll be about 10 columns, and there's thousands of questions they can ask. So because of that, they all end up being a little bit different that way. I don't know. I haven't asked that question specifically, so I can't really tell you for sure. I think a lot of it is, one thing, the program, I mean, the course is fairly new. So some of them we're choosing to take it as elective. Some of them, you know, depending on what catalog they're in, that kind of thing. But I think a lot of it also has to do with the people that don't think they're good at it, push it off if they can. And so I think that also is part of the reason why they didn't connect it with it quite as well either. Definitely earlier. I would say, and actually I just went through the whole curriculum thing this past year. We used to have a CS course that was our like foundation, you know, typical office, learn computer kind of stuff. We just threw it out. And yeah, we said they're gonna learn everything they need to know without having to do that in this course, because I make them use PowerPoint. You know, they know how to use the Word enough. They're going to get better at Excel. And so because we found that even though I think the people were teaching it okay, they just weren't getting the connection of how those products are used in a practical situation. And so this is a way, and not only our school, but this was okay with the computer science people too. So we kind of did it so that all the different schools could incorporate their own class that would teach the skills without it necessarily having to be the traditional, you know, office type course.
I think we need to move on, please.
Okay.
So if